In our headlines on this Tuesday, December 3rd, here in South Korea. Inflation hovers within the 1% range in November, gaining 1.5% on year, and pundits believe this finding stands in line with the BOK's decision to cut its rate for a second straight session to 3%. Meanwhile, LG Energy Solution is poised to purchase partner General Motors' stake in a joint electric vehicle battery facility in Michigan as the U.S. automaker seeks to slim its electric vehicle plans. And in its third crackdown, the Biden administration is restricting exports to 140 Chinese companies to curb China's capabilities in artificial intelligence and defense technology. Consumer prices here in the country remained relatively stable in November as easing petroleum prices served to temper overall inflation. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryan has details.
Consumer price inflation continued to ease in November, with the inflation rate remaining in the 1% range for 3 consecutive months. According to data released by Statistics Korea on Tuesday, the country's consumer price index for last month rose by 1.5% compared to the same month last year. The slowdown in inflation was largely attributed to a significant drop of over 5% in petroleum prices, which helped bring down the overall figure. However, vegetable prices remained volatile as they surged by more than 10%. Prices of specific vegetables such as radish, squash, and cucumber saw particularly sharp rises.
After a sharp 15.6% increase in October due to poor harvests and unfavorable weather conditions, vegetable prices eased to a 10.4% rise in November. While still elevated, the situation has improved significantly from the previous months.
On a more positive note, the index for fresh food items, often referred to as tabletop prices, rose by 0.4%, marking the lowest increase since March 2022. Additionally, the index, which tracks everyday expenses, also remained relatively stable, with a rise of 1.6%, while core inflation showed a rise of 1.9%. Despite the persistent rise in vegetable prices, the overall inflation rate has continued to stabilize, offering some relief amid ongoing economic uncertainty. The inflation rate fell below 3% in April and remained within the 2% range for 5 months. In September, inflation dropped further to 1.6% and has stayed in the 1% range for 3 months straight. Looking ahead, the Ministry of Economy and Finance announced on Tuesday that it expects the inflation rate to stay within the 2% range and pledged to continue its efforts to stabilize the rise in consumer prices. Last week, the government extended the fuel tax cut until the end of February next year to ease the burden of fuel and heating costs during the winter. It also confirmed that the allocated tariff for LNG will be maintained at 0 until March to ensure affordable energy supplies. The government also plans to extend the allocated tariff quota on radishes and carrots until the end of February next year, and continue the tariff quota on various ingredients such as cocoa beans, coffee, and orange concentrate. Moon Hae-ryan, Arirang News.
LG Energy Solution is poised to purchase its partner General Motors' share in a joint EV battery facility in Michigan. Our Choi Soo-young has details.
South Korea's LG Energy Solution will take over an EV battery plant established with its partner, U.S. automaker General Motors. On Monday local time, General Motors announced it will sell its share in a $2.6 billion electric vehicle battery plant in Michigan. The nearly completed plant in Lansing was meant to be the third battery facility of their joint venture, Ultium Cells LLC, after plants in Ohio and Tennessee. Currently, the two companies are discussing specific plans for the sale. LG Energy Solution plans to use the plant as a key battery production hub in North America. GM is adjusting its EV production due to slower consumer demand and uncertainty over future EV incentives. In June, GM lowered its electric vehicle production target from the previously announced maximum of 300,000 units to 250,000 units. Industry insiders believe GM's sale is part of its efforts to improve profitability. The carmaker expects to get back its $1 billion investment in the plant. Meanwhile, LG Energy Solution and GM have also begun joint development of square-type batteries for electric vehicles. On Tuesday, LG Energy Solution officially announced its plans for developing these batteries for the first time, stating they will be used in GM's next-generation electric vehicles. Choi Hyung, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the U.S. government plans to lend $7.5 billion to Star Plus Energy, a joint battery venture between Samsung SDI and Stellantis. According to the U.S. Energy Department, the loan will help the construction of an EV lithium-ion battery plant in Indiana as part of the Biden administration's Invest in America policy. The plant is expected to produce 67 gigawatt-hours of batteries, enough to supply 670,000 cars a year. But whether or not the loan will be finalized before the return of a second Trump leadership remains unclear. There are concerns that the incoming administration may roll back the incentives put in place by the Biden administration for domestic clean energy production. Also in the U.S., the outgoing Biden administration has bolstered export barriers designed to limit China's access to technologies needed to advance its AI and military ambitions. Our Ione covers the latest regulation and its broader implications.
The U.S. government announced Monday the introduction of new export controls to limit China's ability to build advanced semiconductors and develop AI for military use. The restrictions affect both U.S. companies and foreign companies that use American technology in their chip-making equipment. As part of the controls, the U.S. will also stop exporting HBM, or high-bandwidth memory, which is vital for AI chips, to China. According to the U.S. Department of Commerce, the new measures, which follow two similar packages over the past 2 years, are aimed at limiting China's ability to produce advanced chips for its military modernization. 140 Chinese companies were added to the Commerce Department's export curb list, which means U.S. and foreign companies, including chip manufacturers like Huawei and companies that make the equipment to produce chips, require a license to export to them. The new rules cover 24 types of chip-making tools not previously restricted. The U.S. will also apply a rule called the Foreign Direct Product Rule, which will impact non-U.S. companies using U.S. technology in their tools. Most chip-making tools are in this category. Washington has reportedly exempted Japan and some European allies, including the Netherlands, after they agreed to set their own export restrictions. The move could negatively affect South Korean companies like SK Hynix and Samsung Electronics, which control over 90% of the global HBM market. Samsung, in particular, may be impacted as a large portion of its HBM sales, around 30%, go to China, including through Hong Kong. According to South Korea's Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy on Tuesday, the impact is expected to be minimal as export methods will be adjusted to comply with the new regulations, while only a few domestic semiconductor equipment companies are affected by the new controls. On the same day, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Lin Jian criticized the U.S. restrictions, saying they are disruptive to international trade and supply chains. He said that China would take action to protect its companies' rights. China's Commerce Ministry also condemned the U.S. curbs, calling them a form of economic coercion and unfair practices. This comes shortly before Republican President-elect Donald Trump takes office, and he is expected to continue many of Biden's tough measures against China. Yoon-hee, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol sat down with the president of Kyrgyzstan, Sadar Zaparov, here in Seoul on this Tuesday. This latest summit follows their talks back in June during President Yoon Suk-yeol's visit to Central Asia. Our correspondent Lee Si-hoo reports.
South Korea and Kyrgyzstan building new milestones in their 32 years of diplomatic history, establish a comprehensive partnership that will foster mutual growth. On Tuesday, President Yoon Suk-yeol held a summit with Kyrgyz President Sadar Japarov during his first official visit in Seoul, discussing cooperation in trade, investment, energy, and development cooperation, as well as regional and international issues. This a step forward in South Korea's K-Silk Road initiative, adopted earlier this year to increase engagement with Central Asian countries.
대한민국은 이 구상에 따라 중앙아시아 지역 내 우리의 중요한 협력 파트너인 키르기스 공화국과의 관계를 획기적으로 발전시켜 나아가고 싶습니다. 자파로프 대통령님과 저는 오늘 수교 32년 만에 포괄적 동반자 관계를 수립하기로 했습니다.
According to the Presidential Office of South Korea, the two leaders, joined by their respective cabinet members heading foreign and economic affairs, set plans to help South Korean firms enter the Kyrgyz market and vice versa. An MOU was signed specifically to promote trade and investment, which includes an agreement on double taxation. Further cooperation is expected in renewable energy and critical minerals. The two will also tackle climate and environmental issues together, working towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Meanwhile, the Kyrgyz government showed its support for peace on the Korean peninsula and South Korea's goal of achieving unification based on freedom. The two countries shared beliefs that the complete denuclearization of North Korea would contribute to global peace and stability, and urged the North to comply with UN Security Council resolutions. Now, this marks the first official visit by a Kyrgyz president to South Korea in 11 years. Talks will continue on Wednesday, the last day of Japarov's stay, especially on trade and technology, as the two look forward to another summit expected in South Korea next year, joined by the rest of Central Asia. 이시후, Arirang News.
Across the border in North Korea, the ruling Workers' Party is slated to hold a Central Committee meeting later this month to review policies for this year and outline its direction for next year. According to the Unification Ministry here in Seoul, the meeting is likely to focus on Kim Jong-un's regional development plan, which seeks to build modern factories in 20 cities and counties over a 10-year timeframe. Pundits, for their part, believe the meeting may also serve to share the regime's future policy with regard to the U.S. as well as South Korea, as it comes ahead of a second Trump leadership at the White House. Syrian authorities on Monday claimed hundreds of insurgents had been killed in a counter-raid jointly launched with the Russian military. This claim follows earlier news of opposition forces marking a dramatic advance across northern Syria over the weekend, gaining control of Aleppo, the economic capital, as Syria's allies, including Russia, remained preoccupied with their own troubles. The surprise incursion saw Russia's Vladimir Putin reaffirming unconditional support for the Syrian government and aiding a counter-offensive against Islamist-led forces. Also in the Middle East, there have been concerning violations of the ceasefire brokered by the U.S. and France last week to halt the violence between Israel and Hezbollah. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
On the sixth day of the 60-day ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hezbollah, 2 people were killed in an Israeli airstrike in southern Lebanon on Monday. According to the Lebanese Health Ministry, 1 person was killed in an Israeli airstrike some 10 kilometers from the Israeli border. It added that the other fatality was a soldier on duty 12 kilometers from the border who was killed in an Israeli drone attack. Nabi Berri, the Speaker of the Lebanese Parliament who mediated the ceasefire on behalf of Hezbollah, issued a statement condemning the attack as a clear violation of the terms of the ceasefire agreement. However, the Israeli military also claimed that it had carried out several airstrikes in Lebanon over the past few days in response to what they say were Hezbollah's violations of the ceasefire agreement. With both sides accusing each other of violations, Hezbollah fired 2 projectiles toward Israeli-occupied territory, marking its first attack since the ceasefire went into effect. Reports say that both the U.S. and French governments have issued warnings to Israel, saying they believe the Israeli military has violated the ceasefire agreement. UNIFIL, the UN peacekeeping force in Lebanon, also said that Israel breached the ceasefire agreement approximately 100 times since last week. Despite this, the U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller says the ceasefire agreement has been successful.
So what we have seen since the ceasefire went into effect is it being successful. Broadly speaking, it has been successful in stopping the fighting and getting us on a path where we are not seeing the just daily loss of life that we had seen for 2 months prior.
Saying any ceasefire agreement would see some violations, Miller said Washington and Paris have set up a mechanism to look into reports of violations, adding it will engage with the Israeli and Lebanese military. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Back here in Seoul, the National Museum of Korea is showcasing a rare exhibition of Goryeo celadon, including 20 state-selected treasures. Our Eun-jin has a glimpse.
The lion crouches on the incense burner with its mouth open as if to catch prey at any moment. An imaginary fish-shaped dragon shows its lively wings and scales, ready to soar out of the water. Each lotus leaf embraces the entire gourd-shaped ear in a beautiful and balanced design. Of all the Goryeo celadon, these sculpted pieces showcase the lively ceramic depictions made by modeling specific forms, like lions, ducks, fish, melons, and bamboo shoots. The shapes are complex, yet lively, and the aesthetic completeness is exquisite. The celadon making techniques unique to the Goryeo period were based on Chinese processes and the earthenware of the Three Kingdoms and the unified Silla periods.
Embracing and accepting new things to make new creative transformations. That is the important significance behind Goryeo celadon, which has become a source of cultural inspiration and light for us today.
Until now, most of the production techniques of Goryeo celadon pieces have been hidden. Over the past 2 years, the National Museum of Korea has identified specific production processes through actual measurements and computed tomography.
In studying the celadon, we took the eye for aesthetics with importance, but in this exhibition we were able to show scientific data and images based on scientific analysis.
To commemorate this, an exhibition is being held for the first time, showcasing over 270 Goryeo celadon pieces, including 20 state-designated national treasures. Beyond displaying the beauty of the simplicity of the celadon, the exhibition will give a glimpse of the manufacturing techniques of hieroglyphic celadon and the life and culture of the Goryeo people. The exhibition will run until March of next year. 이은진, Arirang News.
On the medical front, researchers here have succeeded in dramatically cutting the time of a viral test used to identify COVID-19 from hours to just minutes. Our Cha Yun-kyung explains.
The polymerase chain reaction is a technique that was widely used to identify the COVID-19 virus during the pandemic. The result of the PCR has a high accuracy by detecting the DNA of a virus that has entered the body. The technique rapidly makes millions of copies of a very small sample of DNA. In order to amplify the DNA of the virus, the PCR method repeatedly heats it to 95 degrees Celsius and then cools it down to 65 degrees Celsius. This process usually takes about 3 to 4 hours, but the researchers found a new technology that reduces this to around 6 minutes and 30 seconds. The key to success is the use of a metasurface, which transfers light into heat immediately by absorbing the light. It is designed to raise the heat instantly by putting loop-shaped nanosubstance on the metasurface. The research team verified that it could amplify the DNA of the COVID-19 Omicron strain virus effectively through the study.
The loop-shaped nanosubstance can minimize reflection and penetration of light, allowing 100% absorption in the near-infrared spectrum. Free electrons on the surface instantly change into heat with vibration when it absorbs light.
COVID-19 has become endemic. However, the scientific community warns that a new virus can appear at any time. Eyes are on whether the new PCR-metasurface technique can be applied to identify these in the near future. Cha Yun-kyung, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. The French government is facing almost certain collapse as opposition parties plan to vote for a no-confidence motion. Both the left-wing coalition and populist right-wing have said they plan to vote for the motion against Prime Minister Michel Barnier, who said he'll force a divisive social security budget through parliament without a vote on Monday. The French minority government's prime minister invoked Article 49.3 of the country's constitution on Monday to push his budget through without a vote in parliament. Now furious opposition parties responded, saying they would oust a new PM in a vote that could take place as soon as Wednesday. Left-wing MP Alexis Corbière said Monday, "That's it for Barnier, he's out of here," while National Rally party leader Marine Le Pen said she could bring down the government if the country's budget bill stays as it is. Now Barnier is almost certain to lose in a vote of no confidence, which would make him the shortest-serving prime minister since 1958. The budget bill for the coming year must be passed by December 21st. In Guinea, a crowd crush following fan violence at a football game on Sunday has killed at least 56 people. According to a local journalist covering the game, many of the deaths took place by the stadium gates, where spectators rushed to escape, causing a stampede. Now, Guinea News said rival fans stormed the game field in protest of a referee's call. Witnesses say security forces also deployed tear gas. The crush happened at the final of a football tournament in Nzerekore, one of the country's largest cities. Now, the West African country has announced 3 days of national mourning starting Tuesday. US chipmaker Intel announced on Monday that its CEO, Pat Gelsinger, has retired from the company after a difficult tenure, failing to revive the former industry leader. Intel said Gelsinger's retirement was effective as of December 1st. Now, 63-year-old Gelsinger, who has worked for Intel for decades, returned as the company's chief executive officer in February 2021. The semiconductor giant's stock price plunged 61% during his near 4-year stint. Now, Intel in August said it would lay off over 15% of its staff as part of a $10 billion cost reduction plan, which Gelsinger said was necessary to fundamentally change the way we operate. Now, Intel named David Zinsner and Michelle Johnston-Holthaus as interim co-CEOs until the board agrees on a new CEO. 77-year-old British singer Elton John said on Monday that he was unable to watch the theatrical piece he wrote the score for as he has lost his sight. Speaking on the red carpet for the launch of the musical The Devil Wears Prada, he said that it's hard for me to see it, but I loved to hear it and it sounded good tonight. Elton John previously said in a November interview that he had lost vision in his right eye while on vacation in July. He also said that his left was not the greatest, meaning he may no longer be able to watch or read anything. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Frigid conditions all over the country today, but more rain is forecast for western regions tonight. Overnight, it will rain or snow in Incheon, southern parts of Gyeonggi-do Province, southwestern parts of Gangwon-do Province, the Chungcheong-do Provinces, Jeollabuk-do Province, and inland areas of Gyeongsang-buk-do Province. Light rain and snowflakes are expected in Seoul at some point tonight. Temperature-wise, tomorrow will be as cold as today. Seoul will start at below 0 degrees. The feels-like temperatures will be about 2 to 3 degrees lower than the actual readings. Please dress warm and be careful on slippery roads. Tomorrow morning, Daejeon, Daegu, and Gyeongju will start off at -1 degree, Gwangju 0 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 4 degrees in Seoul and Chuncheon, Daejeon 6 degrees. For the time being, the cold west temperature below 0 will continue in the morning. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the top stories at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session, and today we touch upon consumer sentiments about the economy and more.